Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're exploring something really interesting. The growing connection between global business and global mission.
That's right.
And it's not just, companies donating profits anymore. It seems much deeper.
It really is. It's about integrating the mission right into the business itself. The sources you pulled together, they show this shift pretty clearly. Business isn't just funding mission, it's doing mission in a way.
Yeah, and one thing that jumped out from the sources is this idea of a spiritual vocational hierarchy.
hmm
The sense that being a pastor or a traditional missionary is somehow more important spiritually than being, say, an engineer or starting a company.
Right. That's a long-held view in some circles.
Okay.
And this deep dive, it sort of challenges that head on based on what we're seeing.
It feels like that perceived hierarchy might have, maybe unintentionally, kept a lot of people on the sidelines of mission work.
Absolutely. If you think your everyday job isn't sacred, then maybe you don't see how it connects to a bigger purpose.
Exactly. But the good news, it seems, is that wall between sacred and secular work, it's starting to crumble.
Definitely seeing that in the sources.
Yeah.
And it's changing how the church thinks about its global mission.
And then there's the practical side. Globalization means some places are harder to access for traditional missionaries, right?
Very true. Doors closing in some areas.
But businesses, they
Yeah.
often can get in. They can build relationships.
Yeah, and that creates this unique space for business professionals.
Mhm.
They can bring economic value, sure, but also social, cultural,
Hmm.
even spiritual influence.
Okay, so let's make this concrete. You found some great examples in the sources.
Yeah, there are some powerful ones. Take Jeff, a CEO. One of his employees, a recent convert, was actually assaulted.
Wow.
And Jeff's response wasn't just HR protocol. He used it as a chance to talk about, loving your enemies.
Yeah.
Actually prayed with the employee for the attackers.
That's faith lived out right in the workplace, isn't it?
Exactly. Then there's Patrick, another leader. He managed to explain the concept of grace to a Muslim employee, something the source noted might be pretty foreign.
Hmm.
And his company, they put their money where their mouth is. A third of their profits go to local charities, managed by the employees themselves.
A third. That's significant. It says a lot about their values.
It really does.
Yeah.
And look at Jung Hyuk, a Korean entrepreneur in China. Started a business, and now something like a quarter of his workforce, that's hundreds of people, have become Christians.
Amazing.
And the company doesn't stop there. They run classes, training programs, even offer scholarships for pastoral studies. It's holistic.
These aren't just random acts either, like Jonathan and Nicole Forcier moving to Barabistan, as the source calls it.
Right. Their story is key.
Their main goal wasn't just getting a visa through business. It was explicitly to honor Christ and bless the community economically and spiritually. They wanted to be seen as contributing business people first.
And that hits right at that spiritual vocational hierarchy we mentioned. There's a theologian, R. Paul Stevens, quoted in the source. He says, mission is the intended occupation and preoccupation of the whole church.
The whole church, not just the specialists.
Exactly. It's everyone's job, regardless of your profession.
Ed Silvoso's analogy, the World Cup one, it really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. The small team of pros on the field, the pastors, missionaries, and the huge crowd of believers just watching from the stands.
Maybe contributing money, but not really playing.
Right. And what's clear is that many Christian business folks, they don't want to be spectators anymore. They want to be on the field using their specific skills.
They feel called to use their business acumen for this larger purpose, not just write checks.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating for them, if the message is quit your job to do real ministry.
But what's encouraging, and the sources point this out, is this isn't totally brand new. Combining business and mission has historical roots.
Oh, absolutely. Go way back. The Apostle Paul.
The tent maker.
Exactly. His trade wasn't just a side hustle. It was part of his strategy. It gave him credibility, helped him relate to ordinary working people.
Which was most people in the Roman Empire, right? Lots of slaves and laborers.
Precisely. And it modeled lay evangelism, showing faith in everyday work.
And it wasn't just Paul. The sources also mention Christian monks in the Middle Ages.
Right. They were farming, building roads, doing practical work.
Alongside caring for the sick, the poor, teaching, it was integrated.
Completely. Their impact was huge, and it was multifaceted.
Fast forward a bit, 19th century Protestant missions.
Yep. Groups like the Moravians, the Basel Mission Society, even William Carey, they incorporated secular skills and occupations into their mission work. So this linkage, it's got history.
So if it's not new, why does it sometimes feel new? Why the hesitation in modern missions sometimes? The sources give some clues.
One reason seems to be this persistent idea that work takes time away from ministry.
Like they're competing.
Yeah. And ironically, as one source notes, sometimes when people leave secular jobs for full-time ministry, they can actually become more cut off from the everyday people they want to reach.
That's an interesting point. Lose that natural connection.
Another hurdle is this false choice, that a business has to be either about social good or about profit.
Like you can't do both.
Exactly. And that overlooks the huge potential for creating social and, yes, spiritual value through for-profit work.
Okay. And then there are practical things, like taxes.
Right. Combining nonprofit and for-profit can get complicated legally and financially in some places. Definitely need good advice there, as the source warns.
But the danger is sticking too rigidly to old nonprofit models and missing the power of business.
For sure. Okay, so the sources also helpfully define some key terms here, because people use different phrases.
Good idea. Let's clarify. Tent making.
That comes straight from Paul. It's usually individual Christians working secular jobs cross-culturally. They support themselves and share their faith. Business might be involved, but it's not always the focus.
Okay. Then marketplace ministry or workplace ministry.
That's generally more about equipping Christians within their existing jobs, wherever they are. Think parachurch groups coaching professionals on how to be witnesses at work. More focused on near-neighbor ministry.
Got it. And business's mission BAM, sometimes called Great Commission companies.
Right. This is the big one for our discussion today, maybe. These are businesses specifically created and run to advance Christian faith and values, often in less reached or less developed areas. The primary goal is cross-cultural mission impact.
Okay, that's a clear distinction. And finally, Christian microenterprise development.
This focuses on helping the poor start small businesses, often with small loans, training. Think poverty alleviation through entrepreneurship, guided by Christian principles, funded mostly by donations typically, less directly about mobilizing for cross-cultural missions compared to BAM.
So different models, different primary aims, though all link faith and work somehow.
Exactly. Understanding the nuances is helpful.
Now, the sources also raise a caution flag about being a missionary in disguise. What's the concern there?
The big risk is deception, really.
Yeah.
Using a business purely as a cover to get into a restricted country without any genuine intent to run a viable, contributing business.
Just a front.
Yeah. And that raises serious ethical issues. If the business isn't actually adding value, creating jobs, paying taxes, offering a real product or service, it looks suspicious.
And it could backfire badly, right?
Yeah.
Getting exposed, kicked out, undermining the very witness you hope to have.
Absolutely. The sources argue that the most effective and often the most secure approach is transparency. Businesses that are openly Christian-run, but are also genuinely good businesses, profitable, employing locals, contributing positively, often find more favor and security.
Value creation becomes its own form of credibility.
Precisely. But there are still challenges as this BAM movement grows. Your sources mention accountability.
Right. Many of these ventures operate outside traditional mission agency structures.
Which means there's a potential loss, right? Loss of shared learning, oversight, the experience built up in the mission world over decades. The source suggests we need new kinds of support organizations, ones that understand both business and mission.
And training is another big one?
Huge. Running a successful business is hard anywhere. Doing it cross-culturally, often in tough environments, plus integrating intentional ministry. That takes a unique blend of skills.
And our current training structures, like in Christian business schools, maybe aren't quite there yet.
Often not. There's a gap in integrating serious cross-cultural ministry training. But the sources do identify traits of people who thrive in BAM or tent making.
What kind of characteristics are we talking about?
Well, they have a solid grasp of the mission mandate. They see how business success and ministry effectiveness are linked. They're comfortable sharing their faith naturally. They're plugged into a local church for support and accountability. Plus, crucial things like cross-cultural adaptability, genuine interest in people from different backgrounds, and importantly, they're committed to learning the language and other needed skills.
And the sources suggest local churches can actually play a big role in nurturing these qualities.
Yes, definitely. It doesn't all have to happen in formal programs.
Let's circle back to the 4 years in Barabistan. That case study really highlights some of the practical tensions.
It does. Jonathan and Nicole's story shows the friction that can happen between traditional church views and this business's mission approach.
Like the issue with their home church wanting ownership or control of the business?
Exactly. The church seemed to tie their official missionary status to the church owning the venture. And there was that disagreement about full-time service.
Right. The church pushed for, what, 2 years of language study before starting the business?
Yeah, a more sequential model.
Right.
Whereas the forciers saw language learning and relationship building happening through the daily grind of the business, it was integrated.
And they funded it independently, wanting to be seen as genuine business people adding value there.
Which, sadly, led to a break with that first church.
But they didn't give up. They found another church that got their vision.
They did. A church with a more flexible view. And they stuck with it in Barabastan.
And the results.
Pretty remarkable, according to the source. The business grew, became sustainable. They gained respect from local leaders, built deep relationships with Muslim employees and families, and importantly, they're seeing real spiritual change happening.
It's a powerful example of the potential, even with the challenges.
Definitely. It really shows what's possible.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, the big picture seems clear. We're seeing a really exciting shift.
Yeah, the broader church, including business professionals, is moving towards the front lines of global mission in new ways.
That old, perhaps artificial line between sacred work and secular work, it's blurring.
It really is. And that's opening up all sorts of new possibilities for engagement and impact.
And for everyone listening, it kind of begs the question, doesn't it? How might your skills, your profession, fit into this larger global purpose?
It's a great question to ask, which leads to maybe a final thought to chew on.
Yeah.
Could it be that globalization itself, often seen just in economic or political terms, is actually being used somehow, maybe as a catalyst, pushing us towards a more integrated, more holistic way of actually fulfilling the Great Commission?
Globalization as a tool for integrated mission. That's definitely something to think about further.